I think the office is muted.
Can you guys hear now? Great, okay.
Yeah.
And you gotta mute yours.
Got you.
And all set.
You want to introduce yourself, or is it fine?
Yeah, I'm Calvin. I live on 106th Street. I've grown up here my whole life. I just really like this because I think teen mental health is very important, and yeah, I just want to help the neighborhood. Yeah, it's very cool.
And then we have this running in CB9, and Calvin is helping spread it to CB7. All right. Goal and impact. The goal of the Teens Helping Teens campaign is to feature the voices and artwork of young people in our community in order to raise awareness about and support mental health. It will give teens the opportunity to see their work on the street with their family, friends, and neighbors. Being able to use the Link NYC kiosks brings mental health from something often ignored to the everyday lives of our community. It will also start important conversations about youth and mental health. And then these are some of the things that we've already put on the streets of New York City. And Calvin made, which one did you make?
That's me. Yeah, it's kind of covered, but yeah.
He made this one. So these are our initial kind of just rolling it out to start the project off. We've had 2 submissions, and they're very similar. They're pictures of cats, and then we have an image, photograph taken by a teenager, and a quote written by a teenager. And then we formatted them with a QR code that links to some resources about mental health, some slogan and some information about the community board. As I hope to expand this project, I want to accept more variety of art and encourage more types of submissions from more people. So my kind of vision in scaling this up is to be able to accept things like digital artwork. And I just sketched an example of it, and it's just an egg, and the slogan is sunny side up. Because these are supposed to be kind of visually appealing things. Like if you're walking through the streets and you see an egg, you might wonder what it is and kind of double take. Because the motivation for this project was just walking through my neighborhood and seeing the Link NYC kiosks and being interested in how they were used and how omnipresent they are and how important they could be. So we encourage more forms of media, digital drawing, arts, collages, whatever the teenagers are interested in doing. We would love to promote it. Outreach. I will be collaborating with the mental health club at my school to find students passionate about the topic who have messages and pieces of art they want to share. I'll also be sending out emails to parent-teacher associations to potentially involve more schools, as I am thankfully able to do now, reaching out to another community board. Moving forward, I like to collaborate with other community boards and involve more people. Exactly. And then this is a one-sheet poster. I've sent this out to a few teen mental health organizations that are pre-established. There's a wonderful podcast called This Teenage Life that runs a website and promotes some mental health resources and has a large community of actually globally involved teenagers who help advocate for their community. So in starting outreach, I've been able to send this out very easily to people to tell people what this project is and how they can be involved with it personally. So I think the information I've already pretty much went over. It's pretty much just saying that so far we're in collaboration with Just Community Board 9, and we would love submissions from young photographers, painters, drawers, artists to help promote mental health. And then the QR code itself goes to a teenage mental health hotline, a Google form in case someone is interested in making submissions, and one other page with compiled mental health resources. Thank you. That's the presentation.
Question. To what extent is this being shared with like school principals, school psychologists? I think that's important as well. So there is a top-down approach as especially the school psychologists and nurses interact with students who may be struggling. In addition, are you present on any other social media platform that students would just gravitate to being on their phones, or their other devices?
I agree. As I've been talking to more people, I've gotten lots of recommendations to make an Instagram. So I think that's one of my steps moving forward. I personally have I kind of have the privilege of going to a school with a school psychologist. My grade has a psychologist, and I've been in collaboration with him to make sure I have input from a professional and make sure I'm sharing resources that are actually usable. And in terms of the top-down approach, I've actually been able to work closely with the co-chairs of my board at CB9. They're Shanika and Deirdre. They've been wonderful in helping me out with this. They've given me some pointers on like the QR code and stuff like that.
It's great, by the way.
Thank you so much.
I want to congratulate you on thinking of this project Because I would imagine that there are a lot of young people who really don't even realize they're having mental health problems. They may be depressed, they may be withdrawn, but they have nothing to compare it with. And I think this project, and it needs to be expanded tremendously, can help people become aware and start helping them figure out what to do once they become aware, where to go, and what the help can be. So I congratulate you, and I'm very sure you can be very helpful.
I completely agree. I think that accessibility is extraordinarily important when doing a project like this. The point of this platform is to be able to show it to just normal citizens in New York City. So I'm super happy to have the opportunity to affect such a, accessible platform like Link NYC.
We have a question from Kristen on Zoom.
Hey there. This is a terrific project. It's really interesting. What I'd like to be able to see, though, is do you have the one pager with the resources that the QR code links to share with us?
I genuinely thought I added a slide of that. I'm sorry that I don't have it. Unfortunately, you'll have to scan it yourself to see. I meant to add a screenshot over here, so it would be easier to explain. I apologize for that, but it will bring you right to the links if you scan it right now. I apologize for that.
Okay, and the second part is who's like vetting that page and ensuring that it's appropriate and up to date, especially if this lasts for some time, that the links are live, that they're the right ones.
Up to date is an important issue because I've checked in with like I mentioned, my collaboration with the chairs of my community board, but I believe that this is related to the first question slightly with a top-down approach and making sure that everything is vetted by a professional. Like I said, I've worked informally with my school psychologist, and I'll continue to work with the chairs of the community board. I think that the participation of people in CB9 would be vital for that. If you guys would be willing to have some collaboration with us as well. My mistake. Community board 7. Thank you.
I just would like one person to own the one pager. Like that to me is like the important part, right? We don't want to be bringing false links or maybe not the best product that we could. So I just want to know who has responsibility for keeping that up to date.
That's an important distinction to make, actually. This QR code does not go on the Link NYC kiosks. The Link NYC kiosks are more thoroughly vetted by the community board chairs. Right now, CB9, and as I'm saying, hopefully CB7 as well. So this QR code I'm sharing almost interpersonally with people who I've talked to and who I want collaboration with in the project. So I've shared this with the leader of this teenage life, and I've shared this with my own school mental health club, but this is more interpersonal. And then more thoroughly vetted is this QR code, which as you can see is different, which was done by CB9, and my mother in collaboration with the co-chairs of CB9 vetted it more thoroughly. So it is, I think that is very important. Thank you for pointing that out, that we need definitely curation and thoughtfulness going into these resources that are going out to the public. And like I said, there is a distinction between this QR code, which is more personal and will not be on the streets yet. And if it were to be, I will make sure to have a more thorough vetting through it.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense.
Thank you.
Kirsten, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. My question is, thank you so much for this. I see in your presentation that you work with Community Board 9. How do you work with them, since it's something that we at Community Board 7 may want to be aware of?
That's a very good question. I believe that the majority of collaboration is opt-in, and I cannot demand anything of you, and I am just asking for, if it's interesting to you, your participation, your collaboration, your help if you're willing to offer it. The ways in which I work with Community Board 9 is that they're the ones who actually are capable of putting the things on the Link NYC kiosks. So I don't have access to these myself. I'm collecting submissions, I'm doing the photos, I'm vetting the quotes, I'm in contact with teenagers who are willing to produce, and then the putting it up on the streets is what I need help with. So if you guys would be willing to do it, we could add CB7 down here on the bottom, and I would be able to provide you with these images, these quotes, and these templates. And then I would love you guys to share it with parent-teacher associations, local schools, people who who might be interested in a project like this, because we would love more participation.
That was going to be my other question. Do you work with schools or other institutions in a prescribed community? And how can we help you to accomplish that?
Thank you so much for your interest. I think the most important thing is sharing this with people who are passionate about it, who would be interested in it, on the level of literally just taking a photo or thinking about something that might be important for someone to hear. If you have had an important conversation about a friend that you thought was uplifting, that you thought was helpful. Like we had a wonderful comment from someone in the room here saying that this is an important thing to bring to the forefront of the community to hear about, to show teenagers that this might be something important to them. So if you would be willing to tell a teenager about this, share with them the poster. I would love to follow up in an email and send you guys the one sheet in case you guys have anyone in mind who might want to collaborate in this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. So I think for next steps, I think we're all very much on board with this project. So I think for the next steps, you should definitely send to us the material that you would like on these Link NYC kiosks, and we'll work on putting it up. I think for you, and from what I'm picking up from the board, is maybe a recommendation for you is to you yourselves reach out to as many schools as possible. Just sending it straight either to the principal or school psychologist of different school, just to like extend the outreach. This is amazing. Thank you for presenting to us, and I'll be in touch with you guys on how to do the next steps.
I just have a question. If you guys have a list of schools or PAs or principals, then we can do the rest.
Okay, yeah, so we'll work on getting that and
We'll do the
sending
rest.
it to you. Perfect.
Thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, I have one more question for them.
Oh, please go ahead.
I might have missed it at the beginning, but it sounds to me that the proposal is that the access to the Link NYC like blurb or ad, for lack of a better word, or PSA, is through the community board. So I don't know exactly how that process works. If the community board, I know some of our stuff is already up there. So do we have a certain amount of bandwidth on Link NYC? Like, how does that process work? And I suppose we can loop our office in and through Max find out more about how that works from our end.
That's a good question. I don't know. I think Alex from our office knows. I do know there are some various requirements that anything we submit to Link NYC, and occasionally Alex will tell me we get something sent back to us. They're not able to post it or unwilling to because it doesn't meet some type of requirements. But we can find out on our end exactly what those are, and that's no problem.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Could I just make a comment about the kiosks? I think if we're trying to reach the community broadly, the community doesn't know what these kiosks are. What can we do, at least in our prescribed area, to let the community know that kiosks exist and what purpose they may serve? Most people just walk by the kiosks and don't know what they are.
I have been thinking about that a lot. Like I said, the inspiration for this project was just walking through my neighborhood and seeing such an accessible platform that I thought could be something I was interested in utilizing and seeing how it works and learning about. And I think that I actually would love to create a sheet that says, like, this is the Link NYC kiosk and this is what it's used for. And that's something that we can put on there. Right now, I'm on the bus every morning and I see the Link NYC kiosks and they have videos of like people cooking, and I think they're social media handles and, you know, like kind of, if I may say, relatively silly, arbitrary things that you can find scrolling on TikTok. And I think this is a platform that should be used for the public. It should be public information. And I think something I would be super interested in is creating a one sheet that says, these are the Link NYC kiosks, and this is what they're for. They're for public information. They're for sharing. They're not for advertising, or they could be for something more helpful than advertising. So I could make a sheet, and I mean, the community board, sorry that I switched the numbers before, the community board 9, which I'm already working with, has, control of what's put on there, and they could put up a sheet that says these are Link NYC kiosks, they're for public information. Because I've actually had this problem of nomenclature before, where I say Link NYC kiosks and people are like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, those streets you see on the sidewalk, and they're like, oh. So yeah, I think telling people or, showing people what they are, what they're called, and what the potential for platforming important stuff is something we should think about. Thank you.
Max, if I could just make the comment, maybe we could think through what CB7 can do to promote the kiosks
Sure.
themselves.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Please do. I'm so sorry. No, you need to apologize. I got confused by, I was a few minutes late. My name's Winn. I'm a policy staffer at the Manhattan Borough President's Office. I'm here to actually talk to folks about some of our early childcare work. So thank you so much for inviting. I got confused about your elevator. I apologize. But it was nice to meet you. I'm sorry if I came in too late, so I think I missed the top of it's like a wonderful presentation. I just wanted to ask a quick question. I heard, so it sounds like there's some interest, good, in some positive interest in CB7, and it looks like you guys have been working with CB9 as well. Are there other communities?
Second of two.
So there's so one thing I would love to ask is, have you been talking in addition to the community boards, but to any other offices in Manhattan?
I started with CB9. I'm here in CB7 because Calvin lives here, and I hope to expand from here.
Awesome. Well, I think one, it's great that you're starting with community boards. If the borough president's here, and all of you definitely heard him say this before, or that community boards are the most local version of shared, just get down in the neighborhood, shared shared democracy and local governance. And I think that was so smart that you're presenting to this wonderful group of folks. And I would love to just also ask, I want to just drop in my card.
Thank you so much.
It sounds like you guys are doing some great work with just helping them get out the word next step as well. I'd love to connect you with our community affairs folks as well, who work with all of our the wonderful Manhattan community boards. So maybe I want to just connect you with some folks.
I'll shoot you an email.
Sorry,
it was terrible to have a conversation with you because we sat here before. I'm sorry.
No, you don't need to apologize at all.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. I apologize for interrupting.
Thank you so much. Can I just mention real quick, at CB9, we did, the first time we used the Link NYC kiosk was for COVID vaccines. And so we had different members of the community board just make statements, and also just encouraging, we're in this together, messages like that, positive, just to have them on the streets from community board members directly. And the second time was, I think last year, it was on mental health. And so we had community partners like, I'm trying to remember, Emma Bowen, Heritage Health. I think there were 12 altogether who put their messages up on the linking NYC kiosk. So that's, and in how they did it in the past was Yutha, the district manager, just sent it in, and they gave us a time and they gave us a kiosk schedule.
Okay, thank you so much. Liz, you wanna?
Sure.
Next we're gonna be hearing from Winn Periyasamy. Did I say that?
Wow, a lot of folks do not get that right on the first go. Thank you.
Here, she's the Manhattan Borough President Office Assistant Policy Director, and they're here to talk about the Universal Child Care Initiative.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, folks. Let me just, so I think I can get a little bit of names on the screen. Hi, Zoom. Hi, Zoom. And but I just want to ask, could I quickly get each of your names?
Sure. I'm Egor.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Kevin.
Hi.
I'm Audrey.
thank you for your emails. And thank you.
And Ira.
Hi, thank you. And I believe I remember, Kristen, you had also reached out as well to request. Thank you so much for inviting us to speak. So my name's Winn. Like Audrey said, hello, of course, yeah. Sometimes I can't tell whether or not I'm projecting well enough, so thank you for that. My name's Winn. I am our assistant policy director. I use they and she pronouns. Either is fine. So amongst other things, I work on our early childcare project, which is also a report that we recently came out with in December. It's been a pretty busy couple of months, as I'm sure all of you know. And thank you so much for being interested in early childcare work. So it's been a minute and there's a lot in that report. So just to quickly recap, and please feel free to prompt me with any questions you have throughout all of this. So we released, it's about a 20-page report with various recommendations in December that is around early child care and how we can ensure that folks have access to it equitably, as well as that it is really working for everyone, for the children involved, for the parents and family members attached, as well as the workers who are really a core part of our early childcare industry. So that means a lot of things. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a background to this. So as of 2 years ago, which is the most recent census data on this, there is an estimated 441,000 children under the age of 5 in New York City, including roughly around 200,000 children between 0 to 2. 80% of New York City families cannot afford the child care that it takes to support their families and take care of their kids and really get the benefits that we know high quality, accessible early child care can have in those really important developmental stages. Because I have not yet been a parent, but yet for any of you who I imagine may be either interested in being parents or are already have been parents before, children develop so fast throughout those early years, and part of what early child care education and care does is really both make sure that they are getting set up for success throughout their later public and private school K through 12, as well as just setting you up for success in life, as well as at the same time for parents ensuring that they can have someone who's taking care of their child while they are participating in work, doing the everyday appointments that they need to do, continuing to take care of themselves so that they can take care of their families. And I think I said that 80% of New York City families can't actually afford that child care, or like they have difficulty with it, or they can't afford it at all. And that's because about the average cost for, and this varies between ages because it is so specific, infant and toddler to some of those older ages, the cost can fluctuate, but this can cost as much as $20,000 a year on average to make sure that these kids that get the care that they need. It's a really high cost, and that's including in Manhattan to folks, including families in the catchment area of MCB7. So that is why this is a community board, and so I know that you all are deeply civically minded and engaged. That's part of why in the last couple of years, the need for universal childcare has really continued to, like, here in New York City, especially on the local level, has continued to really kind of grow. We have transformative programs with public 3K and pre-K for all. There are issues that where sometimes folks cannot access those seats. Sometimes they are far away like the available public childcare slot is far away from where their actual job is or their schools are. So that is part of why we spent over a year talking to families around Manhattan, talking to local groups, providers, parent advocacy groups. We talked to folks who do state level work. We talked to national partners, including in Washington, D.C. and San Francisco, to better understand the nuances of early childcare and how, one, we think it's important to have a universal early childcare system, but also how do we make sure that it's working for everyone? So I'm going to glance over a little bit of what we were calling about so that I can get to where I believe, Avi, you mentioned that you all are particularly interested in next steps. Yeah, so I would love to have a conversation about that. So what we called for were, and we are still calling for, is 3 pillars. One, it is universal early childcare. So, and what we are calling it is U through 2 or universal through 2. There's a little brand new thing in there, but it is basically let's close that 0 to 2 gap and make sure that everyone from birth to 0 to 5 who wants publicly supported early childcare can get a seat and can access that. 2, we are calling for something called the newborn support program. So this is a little bit of there's been a lot of conversation in the last few years around guaranteed income. It's a proposed guaranteed income pilot. So that would be from from the first month of or rather from 6 months to before your your due date to up to 12 months after your child is born. Every month you would be eligible for 12 months for a certain amount of funding to help support so it's about $500 per month for 12 months. And that is flexible funding that would be in the proposed proposal for qualifying families, so that you can get a little bit of extra support for all of those costs in terms of what you need to support your new family. So prenatal appointments, healthcare appointments, diapers, all of that range of support. That's what the newborn support program is. It's supposed to be a complement to the concept of childcare as well. And then the last one, pillar, which is a lot of the sub recommendations, is around how do we make sure that every step of the early childcare system, both U through 2 as well as public 3K and pre-K, is working for both families and for providers. It is consolidating certain amounts of administrative bureaucracy that makes it really difficult for providers to actually get paid on time. Background checks, making those a little bit like the process a little bit clearer and cleaner, so that everyone can get safely, but ensure that they have a background check, but that you can start that work as soon as you can. It is supporting both center-based and home-based providers. There is a recommendation around NYCHA. There's more, and I'm happy to talk about that. So, for anyone who wants to talk to me, and then that is the whole setup and recap of the Universal Child Care Report, where we are now. So we released that report back in December. And we are working on next steps, and that is where I would love to hear a little bit about what you all are interested in. We are in early stages of legislation to make certain of those issues clearer. Some things like those background check questions that I mentioned, trying to clarify some language around that. We have been calling for expansion in childcare funding in the budget for a while now. But we are in support of, for instance, they call it a twos campaign, essentially. Community advocates have started pushing in the city budget for increased funding for 2-year-olds as well to support universal childcare. But we are also still actually in a transition process around what, and I'm going to be just a little bit transparent here about where we are in the childcare project, because there is a lot of often confusing policy changes coming down from the federal government around a lot of different services that are so important to the ground, and that is including childcare. So we are looking at we're trying to keep up with it, to be completely transparent. And we're trying to look at what are the next steps around pushing for strengthening our local universal childcare programs while protecting what funding is available and looking at smart investments to ensure that as changes are happening from places like Washington, D.C., those impact budgets. Those impact state budgets, those impact city budgets. So we are in the middle of a transition moment here. So, but what I would say with that caveat, our office is deeply committed to universal childcare, to investments in early childcare, because our pillars are equity, resilience, and public health. This is what we believe in Manhattan. And we share that with many in Manhattan, including our wonderful community board partners. So I just talked a lot at all of you. So I'm going to pause right now. I am happy to take questions.
Hi, yes. Hi, I'm going to share something personal. Some people may say this is important for the people who need to go to work and they need childcare and they can't afford it. But it's actually much broader than that, because there are many people like me when I was a child who really should have been in that kind of program. I'm not sure that my parents could afford nursery school or not, but I was at home with a non-working mother and she would not teach me anything. So by the time I showed up in school, I was a poor student. And, I was like undeveloped. It was very traumatic. I think this is important for those who need it so that they can afford to go to work and have their children cared for. But developmentally, everyone should have the opportunity for what you're talking about. And I think it will help prepare many children for whatever reason, their economics, their education, whatever it is, so that they will thrive in school and not be like me in the poor reader group, the quote unquote dumb group, because I had a mother who just didn't care to teach me anything. I begged her to teach me to read. Wouldn't do it. You'll learn that in school. Anyway, I'm sorry, I don't want to take up a whole lot of time, but what you're doing is so important for everyone. I don't care about their economics. Everyone needs this. For that, I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. There's one thing that I wanted to add to that, and it's not add to what I didn't talk about, but part of that third pillar is really trying to be mindful of everyone's circumstances, and that is economics. That's also the educational impacts, and this is also, we talk a lot about the developmental milestones, that high quality early childcare, because I would be completely honest. If I was trying to teach my child, and I hope to be a parent someday,
if I was trying to teach my child all of those stages, I would have challenges too. And I don't know, but your circumstances you just shared with me is something that I really appreciate you sharing. But I would really appreciate that type of support, and I would appreciate that support for my kid too. So thank you for uplifting that, because that's so important. Thank you.
Zoom. Michael, yes.
Hi. I do want to get into the economics question a little bit, though, not to, the last part, of course, is very important. But to get down to that economic question, the threshold levels that you were, or do you have threshold levels for some of the services that you were thinking about? I think we look around this community and you see, things like, affordable housing and stuff like that. And the levels are, below 70,000 or 80,000. So the median income here is fairly high. What would the cutoffs look like for some of the programs that you were speaking about?
So I mentioned a little bit about the newborn support program. The threshold level for that is, I can get back to you to confirm the number because I'm a little bit tired. I apologize, but I believe that
That's right. And ballpark is fine. Nothing, so.
I want to answer your question. I believe that it's at least 250% of the federal poverty level, because it is a pilot proposal. Guaranteed income pilots have been popping up like in a lot of places, including in the city council has been starting to work on a pretty similar program. And the universal child care aspect, so that is similar to public 3K and pre-K. There is no threshold level for that because it is building off of the success. We know that it has been working and it has been an investment back into our children as well as into our families. There is, we lose, I believe, on EDC had done an estimate of this, but a few years ago. The city loses 23 billion. If I'm remembering that number correctly, in economic output, because folks are missing that time, that like, and they can't afford, they aren't working. They can't afford to put their money back into services, and we are losing those workers. They are moving. They are staying. They maybe, but they're out of the workforce. So those are some of the economic numbers that I can say of like why this matters. And I'm happy to follow up with you directly. Several folks here have my email if you are interested in having more of a detailed conversation about the economics.
Great, thank you.
Richard.
Yeah, I want to focus on the economics from the point of view of affordability. I can't imagine that the city would, even with federal and state funding, would have enough money for each parent to have a child care person in the home. So we have to think of ways, I would think, to have more group child care. Obviously, using neighbors, older neighbors or grandparents and giving them a stipend is one way to do that. And they can maybe handle 5 or 6 children. Another thing that occurs to me is to provide childcare at the workplace by giving buildings a tax incentive to create a childcare center for employees who work in those buildings, or if maybe even amending the zoning resolution to require new large office buildings to provide childcare space for children of their tenants. And I'm sure there are other mechanisms for doing this, but my point is, I don't think you can do it on a one-on-one basis. I don't think it makes sense.
I know that I'm seeing a lot of hands. Let me start by, first of all, those were some awesome thoughts. Thank you so much for that. So let me how about I will try to respond back to as many of the good like of those like really great recommendations you just gave. And if I forgot something, I am more than happy to have another conversation with any one of you who want to talk about this, because these are really great ideas, and I don't, but I want to be mindful of time. So one, so there is let me think. I'm going to start with the family, friend, and neighbor aspect of what you just shared, because there's actually a really cool program related to that we talk about in our program. It's a wonky title called Legally Exempt but Regulated Childcare. This is a term that I did not come up with, but it is part of something called a child care block grant. And what it does is, and this is where we get into a little bit of the nuances of blending federal, state, and city funding to support childcare. What it does is that for qualifying families, and this is a state and federal term here, this, like the families who qualify for childcare under a childcare block grant, you can also choose to use what you get, which is called a voucher, for a childcare voucher, to pay a family friend or neighbor to watch your child. And it is a really, really not well-known program, but it is there. There are families who use this care, and part of what we are calling for is one, more awareness of this program, that we need to make sure that families know how this works, and two, that we need to ensure that the complicated process of applying and assuring that a family member is actually getting that funding for that childcare, we want to make sure that is simplified and is clear to the families, as well as their grandparent, their next door neighbor, their friend who went through all of these background checks and this process to qualify to be able to be their legally exempt but regulated childcare provider, that they are actually able to do that and to get paid for that time that they are supporting their loved one's child. That's my first response to what you said. The zoning, the zoning regulations, as well as the private partnerships, would love to have a follow-up conversation. We didn't include that in our include thoughts like that in our report, but we have quite often followed up on our policy recommendations with further, in our reports with further initiatives. So I would be honest that I don't yet have a reaction on or a yes and on that one, but I'd love to follow up with you. I hope that's helpful.
Can I ask just to follow up quick? There aren't too many new office buildings being built. So my first option would be to provide a tax incentive to large building owners to provide childcare space. That way, parents can bring their kids to work and pick them up after work. It seems to make a lot of sense.
I'm sorry, did I miss, did you say you had a question that I just missed? I was trying to follow the recommendation.
Kristen, are you going to speak, or I see your hand up? I'm not sure. Okay.
Sure, I think they were just finishing up with Richard, and Avi's there in person.
Okay. If I could just follow up on Richard's suggestion. Richard, in my legitimate working life, I work for a large corporation. And at a time where this whole question of providing daycare for workers was an important issue, And a number of large corporations, large and maybe not so large, went out of their way to create and provide facilities for workers to bring their young children to work. It was at great expense, and it was an abysmal failure. The workers and consequently the parents didn't want to bring their children to work. And I think understandably, because they would have to take public transport, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was then, it was a number of years ago, but I'm just mentioning that to say that possibility has already been tried and didn't work out. Maybe it's time to try again. I don't know, but there were the question of bringing your child and your young child on public transportation to the workplace was one of the main reasons why parents didn't respond to the outreach of companies who were providing daycare settings for them.
So I think what you're doing is wonderful. I think it's really needed here. I think overall this is going to create a better society, especially in New York City, educate children. The first 5 years are very critical to success in life. I had two areas of concern though.
Sure.
Number one is I'm looking at the federal poverty level. 250% of that is $64,550, which is not a lot of money in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's for a family of three.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some thought of making it higher to adjust for the much higher cost of living for New York City? I mean, $100,000 is not even a lot of money in New York City. And then secondly, how do you ensure you're going to get quality workers? Because I see the problem on the other side of the age spectrum when I was dealing with my mother in the final years of her life, getting quality people to want to do that work, to be in someone's home was difficult for seniors. How are you going to be able to ensure that for 0 to 5 or 0 to 9?
I'm smiling because I started my career in home care policy, so you're speaking my language in a lot of ways. Let me take a step back. So because there are a couple different types of childcare. I went into one of them, which was legally exempt from regulated childcare, but also there is two other types. Legally exempt falls under one of two umbrellas. So there is something called center-based childcare, and what I'm talking about is purely it does not include some other areas like nannying, like unpaid unpaid care by a loved one, like babysitting. Those are they come under an umbrella called informal care. And I'm not qualified to talk about the ways that there may be policy recommendations on that. I would have to do some research. But what we were focusing on in our research are some things called center-based childcare as well as home-based childcare. Legally exempt falls under the regulated falls under one of two types of home-based childcare, and the other one is called family childcare. Now, I will just clarify. So center-based childcare doesn't happen in the home. It is brick and mortar spaces. So some of those thoughts about zoning regulations, those are interesting.
Talk more about that.
Yes, please. So those are, you all live in Manhattan. You know that storefront ground level and space is precious and rare. So and so the ability to afford some of those rents
Quite often, center-based childcare actually occurs, is co-located in NYCHA complexes around the city. And there are follow-up recommendations around that of just some of the things that I'm sure that you all may hear about of just capital improvements and some of the struggles that regularly happen in NYCHA complexes. But that is one thing to say, that not all childcare actually happens in the home. Secondly, family childcare, that is called a home-based childcare because that is rather than someone coming to your home, it is actually you bringing your child to someone's childcare that happens, a childcare space that happens to be located out of their apartment, out of their house, etc. And those are, I bring up all of these because there is a wealth of good in having a childcare system that has options that you can pick of what feels like it responds to your language needs, that it feels something that is comfortable with your family and like your culture, that is near your workplace but also your house, all of those things that meet you where you are. So I just want to make that was a long rant to just kind of set the stage of how childcare happens. Now please repeat to me your specific questions.
Oh, the first one was raising the threshold, because we're just looking at the website, 250% of the federal poverty level for family 3 is 64,000.
Yeah.
550. In New York City,
It's
You
that
can AMI, use AMIs,
what's AMI?
area median income. That still has problems, but it's not as bad as the problem.
And how's the area defined? Is that New York City?
Well,
Is
it's
that
the metropolitan
Manhattan?
area, but
Is that based on MSA?
But for example, family of 5, AMI is like $1.25.
Okay,
That starts to become more rational,
yes,
because that's, if you're making AMI, even if you're working, both people are very frequently working.
right. Okay, that's better than $64,000.
Yeah.
That's a helpful suggestion. So first is the question is, are there thoughts on scaling,
Right.
essentially? Then what was your second question?
Oh, finding quality people, because it's very hard to find them.
Yep, totally.
For
And that is
seniors.
part of, so I'm gonna start with that one.
And retaining them, finding them and retaining them.
I'm gonna start with that one because that is why I explained the difference between home-based,
Right.
like home-based and not home-based childcare. Because, and this is part of where we get into like, how do we address the needs of the workforce so that they can address the needs of our families. It is actually regulation wise and legally, in order to qualify especially specifically under that child care block grant that I talked about, but also New York State law, there is a lot of things that are in place to try and ensure quality. That includes ratios of staff to children. So basically I would call it a safe staffing ratio, to borrow something from the nursing profession. That is a quality check. So in terms of when you're an infant, 1 person to 12 infants, that's not safe. And so that is one quality check. There are certain, in order to get to certain levels of responsibility, certain titles, you have to have certain amounts of licensure as a, just like that, and this is specific to not like to family childcare and center-based childcare, because legally exempt but regulated. It's because it's family and friend and neighbor care that it is still regulated, but it doesn't have certain of those requirements, because there is a little bit of that trust and that knowledge of the child built in for families to be able to choose that. That being said, because you made that really good point about home care from the aging and disability
perspective. We don't have enough workers in this space. Many, I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but I know it is in the report. There's I'll have to get back to that, the actual percentage, but we have the percentage of childcare workers who are in this profession who make such like they're for the amount of hours that they have to work, they qualify for public benefits, including childcare subsidies. That's just not a sustainable workforce measure. That is part of why we also call for increasing like workforce in the investments in funding. So for instance, I mentioned that I was talking to colleagues in Washington, DC. Washington, DC, a few years back, passed a really revolutionary workforce development fund that really increased the amount of take-home pay significantly, and it has substantially changed people's lives. Not only been able to help workers take care of their own kids and take care of their own basic needs, but actually be able to feel like they can sustain and grow in a childcare space. So I agree. All of your quality questions are so important. And we also need to, but like in order to keep that quality in the workforce, we have to invest in the workforce. So that is where we are, where our report and we have been calling on the state as well as on the city for a series of other recommendations that I am happy to get into with you. And then on the 250, the federal poly level, AM has a great recommendation. I want to
Which one?
On the area meeting.
Yeah, well, it's used for affordable housing. So there's it's level 60, 80, 100, 125. You know, she's 160 sometimes, but that's sort of out of favor.
Yeah,
right
I mean,
now.
I honestly can't tell you which one because I need to go back to our team and think about it.
NYCHA's is around 60%.
Okay, that's really helpful. Because we hadn't thought about, because it isn't I've usually heard about it. I'm not a housing specialist, so I've usually heard about it used in housing spaces. I need to talk to some of our folks who have a little bit more expertise on housing to think about it. To get to your point, because I know that there was a couple other folks who had questions. The part of it is guaranteed income pilots are pretty new. And it is part of and that is a potential place where partnerships like this is already a partnership. You guys are really giving some great ideas, are helpful because folks need to, there is research that shows you give guaranteed income like pilots like that, like that is an investment back into those families in various different ways. But it is still something where not a lot of people know about it. So it is the idea is 250% of the federal poverty level, but part of that is building awareness, getting some results back into it. You need to get the program first to then see where, to get to study it, and then see what's working on it, what can be improved, and how we make sure we are giving those benefits in the future to others who need it.
Could I just ask a question or make a comment? In the current political climate, is your thinking changing, or has it changed, or how do you think you might react or respond to the current political climate?
So I'm going to first follow up with a question about, so that I make sure that I'm giving you an answer to your question. When you say in the current political climate,
What hour of what day?
I want to make sure I understand.
Well, the current political climate is that everything is being cut back.
Mm-hmm.
being cut back to the bone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. So I have two thoughts on that. One, we thought really long and hard on these recommendations. I will say staff time wise, this took a lot. This was a really cross departmental report. I cannot speak for everyone. For my capacity, that was a lot of my personal research capacity in my work. It was probably the most that I was working on day to day for about a year. So we and there were many other people internally and externally who were working with me on that. So to answer that, two things. We came out with the universal child care plan because we think that smart budgeting can also look like investing in services so that we can also see those results come back in terms of economic, how we see returns to our economy when folks have access to things like childcare, when we see educational the results in terms of those children being developed and being able to keep families here. So that's part of why we are really excited to still be amongst those who is calling for a universal child care plan. So the second part of that, though, is there is a changing political climate, and that's why I mentioned. Sorry.
No, but when you.
Oh yeah, of course. I didn't want to ignore you.
Well,
Yeah. Secondly, that's why I brought up in transparency the changes coming up from Washington. So that is a lot of, and I'm curious to hear what you're going to say, or do you want to, before you lose that thought?
Sorry?
Before you lose that thought, do you want to chime in?
Well, I was going to say, talking about changing political climate, we have somebody who is saying free IVF for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time says, I don't want to educate the children. And it's the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how do you define the current climate with that kind of contradiction?
Yes.
Okay.
It is an open and evolving question. But what I would say is on a practical level, childcare funding from the federal government that has been pretty stable support. That comes from, and there are certain different agencies in our recommendations that those are related to, amongst other things, the Federal Department of Education. And so there are certain open questions around changes to things like the Department of Education,
right.
Regulatory as well as budget funding. And so in terms of the changing climate, I think my honest reaction or answer to that is that we are trying to keep track of what is still what we know and what we don't know, because that is shifting around how our local childcare funds and workers and supports. That's going to impact them, while we have to build ships and while sailing them or fly planes etc., while also trying to ensure that what we are calling for on a city and state level is also something that our city and state can do, so that we can continue to not see progress be taken away from us, but also be able to push forward. I hope that answers a little bit. I want to be mindful. Kristen's been waiting for a minute.
Yeah, actually,
and it's been more than a minute, but I think you know what I mean.
Can you bring up the same thing we
Yeah.
talked about, Gail?
It's similar, but it's a different bucket. Because what I wanted to move on to was your third pillar, because that's not like a new budget ask or a new line. And it was
Yeah.
more about making what we have now work better.
Mhm.
This committee in the past has passed resolutions to
You're reading
support
my
the
mind.
childcare providers in our neighborhood who have not been paid on time by the city, which is a really huge barrier, right? And we know that that's not completely resolved yet. We also know, as you mentioned, the things that slow the process. Like, do we want everyone to pass a background check before they work with children? Absolutely, that's important. However, the way it works right now, it takes far too long, and it means that the job often passes or those positions go unfilled, right? So, can you talk a little bit more about what you want to do to improve what's there and what maybe CB7 could do to lean in on that part?
Sure. So because there is a lot in there, I am going to literally read out a bunch of things so that I cover pillar 3. So what is included in there? It's a mix of city and state, some budget, but also legislative and administrative policy recommendations, like you mentioned. So that includes creating one unified department of early childcare education and intervention, similar to what's done in DC and San Francisco. I actually talk with our team with some of the folks in DC about how that works. It is streamlining. So right now, our the childcare workforce and budgets actually happens in multiple different agencies, and I think you all know that that means that there is a lot of coordination time and capacity lost. So we are calling for, amongst other things, so we were calling for one unified agency on the city level, ensuring the city can take full advantage of federal dollars to pay for childcare and easily connect families to care by eliminating unnecessary restrictions on subsidized seats. That's that block grant funding that I was talking about. So that actually, we were calling on to pass 3 bills related to terms called presumptive eligibility, the minimum wage requirement elimination, and decoupling. I can answer any questions about that later on, but that they all require a lot of explanation to get into that. Those are state level, and so I think Kristen, some context about that. I didn't get into this, but early intervention and preschool special education, there is a lot of good regulatory work that can and needs to be done in those spaces to ensure that qualified occupational therapy, speech therapy, PT, etc. Different wraparound services are available for children who, and high quality specialists are there and available for children can come to their home as well as their local childcare spot, wherever they find themselves in community, to be able to support children who are experiencing early signs of developmental delays or disabilities to help them be able to get that extra support that they and their families need to also make sure that they're hitting their developmental goals and milestones, and that they're going to be able to learn at the same rate, or learn at a rate that supports their needs in community alongside other kids. That is a huge thing for our educational growth. Background checks we talked about. And there's a specific requirement, recommendation, recruiting and retaining high quality childcare workers, creating a citywide childcare and early intervention navigation pilot program for that would be around caregivers who have gone through these processes to help be able to talk to families who don't know about how to sign up for childcare, how to sign up for early intervention, to get approved, to get in those complicated documentation and get the care that they and their families need. It's a peer-to-peer model. Investing in family childcare, we talked a little bit about family childcare. Expanding Promise NYC, that is a city-level program that supports migrant families, and it's seen some really good results. And providing daycare centers and NYCHA developments with support and strengthening their relationships to families. There are co-located NYCHA centers in NYCHAs that do not always, they have difficulty with their capital needs because of where they are essentially a renter in a way. And so making sure that if an HVAC is not working and they need to put in a request, that it's done in a timeline that they don't close, because childcare runs on a shoestring budget. Like it is, and also ensuring that they can actually connect with those families. I'm saying all of that because I would love to follow up with you all and talk a little bit more about what could potentially be some resolutions that we would love to see if you all would be interested in considering taking up on your or signing on to letters. It's really, this is the part where we're still developing out next steps, in part because of all of the changing circumstances. But I'd love to be able to stay in touch and talk about like where we're seeing where we're going to push on some more administrative things that are as close to budget neutral as we can, so that we can really start to get into those fixes. I talked a lot. Kristen, does that help?
That's good. I think that our earlier stuff with early childcare was actually far more simple, and it was just saying to the city, pay your social service providers on time. Bottom line, that's all it was.
We have had a lot of those conversations about contract delays. That's also in the report. So if I don't know if I've actually seen this resolution or letter. I would love to. Could I ask if I could get or if I could see it?
I think it's like 2 years ago, but we'll share it with you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
But those things that you mentioned about prompt payment to various social service entities is not just related to this, it's across all agencies. And the same problem is in terms of turnover and inability to attract qualified people is endemic to both the city and the state. The positions don't get filled. I work for a state agency. We've been anywhere from 5 to 10% understaffed. I've been there 5 years. We can't attract people.
May I ask which state agency you're doing?
No.
Okay.
But
Have you expressed your
the city agencies, as you're well aware, have the same problems. One of the problems of housing production is not brick and mortar, it's not funds, it's not sites. Those all are problems, but just getting HPD to process the paperwork. And then they have all sorts of positions that are open that you have to be on a civil service list, even when they're professional positions. And of course, the people that would normally fill those positions in the rest of the world are the same people who don't go on civil service lists, but are qualified to do them. So for example, if you work in finance and it's in terms of financing affordable housing, you're not qualified because you haven't put yourself on a civil service list, or you haven't been with the city long enough to do this. So there are all sorts of structural problems which are above and beyond this meeting and above and beyond the council level. Though I know our council member is more, how can we say, more directive than some other city council members.
I agree. In terms of the across the board
Yeah.
sort of that thing, it is a really, everything you said is I agree. There's a lot of structural issues that happen with the overall childcare industry and these childcare workforces that are shared across city and state levels. I believe that you all have probably met some of my policy team colleagues who work on other areas, and we do talk about a lot of these things across our areas, and that's the thing, is that we need to do a lot of this work across a lot of services.
The agency, these are great. I'm sorry to get off the tangent here, but these are great positions for people who are trying to get started into a field, but after 5 or 10 years, it's really hard to keep people there. And not to knock the state, but because the state also has agencies that cover a lot of this. There's a downstate pay differential between upstate and downstate. You know what it is? $5,000 a year. That's the difference. So this is an endemic problem to how we move things through government. It's not that, and of course the procurement issues which you just mentioned. Also, if the HVAC unit is down.
Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, if the HVAC unit is down, and it can take 6-8 months to get it fixed. This is in public schools. This is in CUNY. You know, I can go on and on and on.
100%. And some of these.
So I'm just whining. That's all I'm doing.
I hear it. And there's a lot of work to be done across public service to make sure that that public servants can serve, as well as like in all of these important roles that you're talking about, as well as public services can actually be handled on a timely and quality way to get to New Yorkers.
And I just spent a lot of time on procurement. But can I just get to the one question I've been trying to get to? Because I haven't had a chance to ask anything. I've just been interrupted, so my apologies.
I am here as long as you all want to talk to me. And I can follow up.
Granular level, a very, very granular level. The Department of Education has a large space finished, ready to occupy in MCB7. I think you're aware of that.
Ira, we're going to hold that conversation for, we have a lot of moving parts with that. So that's ties into like some of our concerns for tonight, but that's not like, doesn't seem that that's the focus.
That's my concern. Because our last conversation with Gail was that the DOE was thinking that it wasn't a current point of discussion. Yeah, still a moving piece, that's great.
Yeah, we're still in touch with Gail's office.
Okay.
I will trust that you all follow up as you need on this question.
Our previous discussion indicated that somebody was going to take action, and it'd be really great if it was the kind of action that we liked. That's all. Michael?
Hey, I just wanted to make just a quick comment. I know we've been talking for quite a bit here, so less of a question, but I just want to say in general, the work that you're doing and the efforts here, I don't think it's possible to be too ambitious with early childhood care. I think like everything is great. I think, and I think it kind of goes into Kristen's point from a moment ago, that third pillar of strengthening the things that we already do and making those more accessible for more New Yorkers, just from the perspective of a young professional, and just feedback from some of my friends who are starting families who have, young kids. I think the success of something like Universal 3K is something that we should all be really proud of, and it's great to continue to try to strengthen those. I know that's still a very competitive process, and a lot of folks still get left out of that. So, great to be ambitious, great to keep trying to expand everything that we're doing to push this line. I think it was kindergarten for a long time, and now it's pre-K, and now it's 3K. So, the further we can push that back, the greater that coverage can be. And so, definitely keep at it. I think trying to address that 3K part to really make it accessible to all New Yorkers, just because you hear some of the horror stories from time to time. I think that's a very tangible, practical thing. A lot of that infrastructure is in place, and it would allow you to kind of continue that success. But just thanks. So again, not really a question, just more of a comment.
No, and I just to quickly follow up on that, that third pillar that I rambled at you all a little bit on, one thing that it includes overall throughout is making sure that 3K and pre-K are working for all the families who are using it while ensuring that you can actually navigate to getting to use it. So I just want to say, because it is a long report and it technically looks like 3 pillars, but it actually is many, many, many more recommendations than that, because of the way that we use bullet points and different ways of like writing. That is to say that we hear you, and we hear a lot. Like, we hear the families who have been sharing those stories, and we agree. And we're working. We are working on it with there are other folks in government who care about that work. And there are many, many folks in the community who have been leading on that one, on all of these types of work for years. So we agree.
So thank you so much for coming. It's been super informative. And thank you for that. And I just wanted to ask if you have a request from us. So I mean, we could do a letter to write or a resolution to pass that would be helpful towards this work.
I'm gonna follow up with you on that, because right now I want to think about which of the recommendations that and I just in transparency, because childcare work has been, and childcare policy has been changing so fast in the last, what is that? In February 20th. In the last roughly 5 weeks, there's been a lot of changes. But there are a couple of things that I think I'd like to make sure that our team can stay in touch, so that we can follow up with maybe using your time and interest in partnering as effectively and respectfully as we can. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. Is there another question there? Or what? Wait, I wasn't sure if that was the only question that you had.
That was always a
Awesome.
Yeah, but by the way, there are other ways of addressing the zoning issue than what Richard said, and there are other patterns. And actually, there are some things currently in the zoning resolution that a interested party could use, and there are other programs that are used to create. And I think you've got a lot less resistance if it's optional rather than making it mandatory. And often people or developers of buildings, both profit and nonprofit, because I work with a lot of nonprofit, you always are trying to get rid of the lower floor 2 of buildings. And guess what? That's exactly where the child care uses want to be.
Lower than 4 feet, so ground floor?
Particularly ground floor.
There's a lot of there's a lot of interest in ground.
Yeah, and second floor is a secondary issue. And obviously for 0 to 2, you really want to be on the ground floor.
Yeah. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it's only because I am really interested in following up.
Sorry.
I thank you for that, and I want to. Sorry, Sophie. And I want to be mindful of time, but I'd love to follow up once.
Yeah.
Around zoning.
Anyway, that's one of the problems in a lot of affordable housing, which HPD and sometimes not HPD together, is in those neighborhoods. We have the first floor, and there's actually no market for it. Mm-hmm. And even in moderate income neighborhoods, and I can actually show you where that's we're required to create commercial space in what appeared 5 to 7 to 10 years ago to be viable commercial space, and that's actually being turned into childcare now, but it's for-profit childcare, which is a somewhat different thing than we're talking about. But you can see even in this neighborhood, there are some first floor spaces that are moving to childcare now. So that's available space, and I think any use there becomes desirable. All the cannabis stores that Kiel just got rid of are now available.
I want to be mindful of y'all's time, because that also, I didn't see your agenda, but it sounds like you have multiple things that you're trying to talk about today.
Is there anything else I can address right now before I let you all go? Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for the time and for the care and thoughtfulness and
Thank you.
you all do. These are my favorite types of meetings. So just thank you. Thank you for the time, Michele.
Thank you so much. Speaking for the committee, I think for now, we'll hold off on any action until we receive further communication from the Borough President's office. Does that sound good? Yeah. Yeah, okay. I think Kristen had something to speak to us, but we need to end the public session. Max still on. Do that.
I'm right here. What would you say?
Kristen wanted to talk about the new public member, so could we end the session?
That's no problem. It's just if there's anyone else from the public there, if you could just kind of ask them to go. I'm gonna get the couple people that are on the attendees side of Zoom off. So just give me 1 sec.
Thank you.
Very well informed, but if there's anything I can do.
Thank you, Max, and the YouTube.
Yeah. Sec.